Are you new to D&D? Well, there are a whole lot of different types of dice we use in D&D, just like this. I mean, a whole lot of different shapes. And if you're not familiar with tabletop role-playing games, a lot of these will be unfamiliar to you. In this next episode of The Art of Character, I'm going to do a quick dive into how dice work in Dungeons & Dragons. I'm Chris. Welcome to the Art of Character Dungeons & Dragons podcast, where we explore all things D&D. Let's roll. And Let's Roll is pretty appropriate today because our topic is dice. And dice and D&D are completely and totally synonymous. Dice have been around since the very beginning of the game, and we use some interesting and unique dice in D&D and have since way back then. Now, if you're interested in some of the history of dice in D&D and how we used them back in the past, check out the episode linked below. But otherwise, let's get into it for today's episode. So in D&D, we have a bunch of different polyhedral or multi-sided geometric shaped dice, really. Everything from a 4-sided die, 6-sided die, which you're most familiar with, 8-sided dice. We also have 10-sided, 12-sided, and 20-sided. The 20-sided is used most often for a whole lot of things. It's used for other tabletop role-playing games also. So we're going to do a quick dive and kind of get into it. I'm going to explain how dice work in D&D, and you're going to see a bunch of different, I guess you call them dice notations throughout the rules. We'll explain that, and anyway, show you how all of it works, give you a basic beginner's overview and guide to dice in D&D. Man, D&D dice are so cool. Look at all of these colors. Look at all these shapes. It's just amazing. I love looking at dice. I love playing with dice. Anyway, we're going to get into the basics, as I said, and do a real quick overview. All these dice are just so cool. Here's a 4-sided die with 4 sides. Here's a 6-sided. You're probably most familiar with that. There's an 8-sided die right here. A 10-sided die. Here's a percentile die, also a 10-sided die, a 12-sided one, and a 20-sided die. This is the most commonly used, and that's the highest you can roll. That's a 20, or a natural 20. Yay! Here's how these work. A D4, the numbers on the top, or how these are read sometimes can vary. The design varies, but anyway, in this case, the 4 is at the top, and so that's the highest one that you would roll. There's the 6s. You kind of get that. Anyway, the number that's on the top is the one you read. And in dice notation in D&D, you'll see a D. So it'll say D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, or D20. What D means, that's the number of sides. It's a dice with that many number of sides. A D4 is the 4-sided. A D6 is 6-sided. D8 is 8-sided. D10 are either of these. Well, actually, this is a percentile dice. It'll say percentile. A D12 is this one with 12 sides, and this is a D20. So then how dice notation works is it will say a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or however many numbers before the D. A 1d4 means you roll a d4 one time. A 1d6 means you roll a d6 one time and take that result. A 2d8 means you roll 2d8s and add those together, etc. 2d12s, you would roll 2 12-sided dice and add the result together. And then with each of those, sometimes there's a modifier. So it may say 1d6 plus 3. That means you roll 1 6-sided die and then add the modifiers. So let's say you have 2d8 plus 4. So you would roll 2 8-sided die and add the 4 to that one time. So then we can go right here. It may just say a d20, and that means you roll, ooh, natural 20. Look at that. Then you roll a d20. That's when you take that result. And then the other type of dice that you use right here are percentile dice. And this is the 10s and this is the 1s. And the way that these work is that's a 28. And they can be a little bit confusing. If you roll all zeros, that's a 100. If you roll a 10, if you roll a 10 and a 0 like that, then that's a 10. If you roll 0 zeros and a 1 over here, then that's a 1. Anyway, the best way to remember that is all zeros. That's the only way to roll a 100. And this is a 1 right here. And if it's the other way, if it's a 10 and a 0, then it's a 10. So a lot of these dice are used for all different purposes. The D6, D8, D10s, D12s, those are oftentimes used for damage that are done with different spells, different weapons, things like that. But there's all kinds of other tables and things that a DM will need to roll, and he'll let you know when that time comes. He may say roll a percentile or roll a D4 and tell me the result. There you go. The D20 is one of the most commonly used dice in D&D. We use a D20 system. What that means is we have a lot of things you roll a D20 for. So let's say you're rolling an attack and the armor class is a 16. That means you need to roll a 16 or higher on the D20 to make that attack. So meets or beats. Now you also get to add modifiers to that. So let's say your modifier was +2. You roll a 14. You added 2 to that. The armor class was 16. That hits. There are skill checks and savings throws, things that happen. Let's say you need to use athletics or you need to use insight or something like that. You roll a d20 and you'll have modifiers on your character sheet that relate to that. And again, you will be meeting or beating a number that the DM may tell you or may not tell you, but to let you know whether you succeed or fail. And that's the basic overview of how dice work in D&D. I hope all of your ventures are amazing and fantastic, and these little polyhedrals right here are at the core of it all. Well, that and you. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Art of Character. If you've made it this far, consider liking, commenting, or subscribing, or click below and join our Patreon or our Discord. You can also click below and get something from our merch store. Until next time.